So we are wrapping up our series on the most important players of each and every class, and now we are down to the true freshmen. So a lot of it, it's opinion, it's speculation, it's preseason hype, and I don't think there's been any player in this class that's had more preseason hype than Elijah Griffin, of course, the highest rated recruit in this class. 6'5", 285, physical tools that you rarely ever see in a freshman. But here's the thing, despite the size, moves like a much smaller player, can play just about anywhere in the scheme, and due to the lack of depth at the defensive line that we were talking about earlier, there's a really good chance that he's going to contribute early, which is rare for players at the line of scrimmage.
Yeah, especially on the defensive or, like you said, offensive side of the ball. See those guys get thrown in straight out of high school as a true freshman is really strange, but there's no question Elijah Griffin has the size to do it. I think about Elijah Griffin. Here's what I'm thinking about. How can he make an impact? Because I think he's going to play because of there's not a ton of depth on the defensive line. We've seen so many injuries. Georgia plays a tough schedule. Guys are going to get banged up, and Elijah's going to have to get out there. So I was kind of going through the numbers, and I've done this for all these freshmen here. What can we expect? So if he's like the fifth defensive lineman on the chart right now, which is not bad, what would we get at? Jamal Jarrett was that guy last year. Only had 3 tackles as a sophomore. Okay. Jordan Hall, though, as a freshman back in 2023, played 177 snaps, 7 tackles, 8 quarterback hurries. Would we be happy with that? Bear Alexander, 2022. 11 quarterback pressures, had a sack as a freshman. To me, that's about where we would expect Elijah Griffin to hang out. Give me some quarterback pressures, give me a couple big sacks and big moments, and we'll see what you got.
What I like about him is that he's a potential game changer. If he can find a way to stay healthy and adapt quickly to the level of physicality that's in the SEC, I think we're going to see him get more experience as the season goes on, and he could be one of the key reasons that in the future the Georgia defense stays elite.
Yeah, I wonder, because you and Jeff do such a great job on Before the Hedges profiling these guys, we get to see Elijah Griffin, and he seems like such a nice guy. And he's played at single A football at Savannah Christian. I want to see a mean streak and see when he gets on the field in an SEC game, does he have that, mean streak? Can he get out there and dominate a little bit? That's the part I have not seen yet from him.
So someone who I feel like is in a similar position to Elijah Griffin is the next guy on our list, which is Isaiah Gibson, because there is a lack of depth at the edge room. I mean, a 5-star edge, Kirby Smart's going to find a way to utilize him some way, somehow, especially in those first 2 games where it's not a gauntlet of an SEC schedule. 6'4", 240 pounds, super freaky athleticism. He's long, twitchy, powerful, exactly the kind of frame that Georgia loves to develop into a future NFL draft pick. Don't be surprised if he ends up becoming one of the defining defensive players of this entire 2025 class.
Yeah, he can get out there. He's big enough to go ahead and play, too. Again, played pretty big football at Warner Robins, so feel good about that. The comps I had, all right, so if he's like the 5th edge rusher going into the season, could he be what Gabe Harris was for Georgia last year, give you 3 sacks? Although Gabe Harris was a sophomore at that time. Could he be Marvin Jones in 23, give you a sack and 5 hurries as a sophomore? Now, the guy we would love for him to be is Jalen Walker. I think back to 2022, 13 pressures. He had a sack as a freshman. Could come in and make a difference. I think he can come in, and we will be calling his name on Saturday afternoons. Look out for Isaiah Gibson.
So when it comes to the next guy, unlike Isaiah Gibson and Elijah Griffin, I don't anticipate Talyn Taylor to make an early impact just because of how much depth there is in the wide receiver room. However, this is the 5-star wide receiver that the Georgia fans have been desperately wanting since we've seen other rival schools have their own. But I don't think that they're just going to let Talyn Taylor ride the bench all year. They're going to have different maybe a play or 2 here and there where they can get him involved, because what I think that he adds to this group, he's not a Colby Young or a Noah Thomas that's just like so long that you can get those 50-50 balls in the end zone. If you go back and watch his high school tape, where he really excelled was yards after catch, which is not something that Georgia really had last year. So I think that's what he brings to the table. They're going to find a way to get him the ball in some scenarios that leave people guessing.
Yeah, and wide receiver is a spot where you're going to play a lot of guys. And we talked about the pass catchers earlier, right? You got Zachariah Branch, Noah Thomas, Colby Young, London Humphreys, Dylan Bell. They're all going to be on the field before Talyn Taylor does, just because of the experience they have in this offense and the relationship they've built with Gunnar Stockton. So how does Talyn add to the offense. I think the low end, what did a freshman do last year? Kobe White had 4 catches, but I think he's going to be better than that. I think he'll be higher than that. Anthony Evans, a guy like that, could he be a role player like that this year? 9 catches on 110 snaps as a sophomore. I think he could. 2023, Arian Smith, who was about that 7th wide receiver, had 8 catches, but made the most of them, had 2 touchdowns. Mekhi Muse, 13 catches back in 2023 as a redshirt sophomore. So that's where I think he kind of fits in. Can he make the most? That was the thing he did so well in high school, is they made the most of every catch. What was his crazy percentage of balls caught versus touchdowns? Like, he took it to the house most of the time. So if he can take advantage of that, he can make a huge impact this year. It is just harder to get on the field with those wide receiver groups because there's so many guys ahead of him.
All right, so next we're going to talk about the offensive tackle, Juan Gaston. When I think about Juan Gaston, he is everything that Kirby Smart looks for in an offensive lineman. Massive size, the SEC level physicality. I mean, if you're watching on video, I mean, it is very evident. I mean, he's the fence. Like, his head is over the fence. There's a lot of long-term upside that comes with Juan Gaston, and with the roster changes up front, I think he could get in the mix much sooner than expected. He may not be the flashiest freshman in this group, but in terms of building an offensive line that can help Georgia to a title contending roster later on, I think he's one of the most valuable of this group.
I think it's like Elijah Griffin. He's big enough, and Isaiah Gibson. He's big enough to contribute now, which is a good thing. And I think the thing we always have to keep in mind too, with the lack of depth that Kirby Smart complains about, more of these guys are going to have to be ready to play as a freshman. And we heard so many good things about Juan Gaston in spring practice. It feels like he is one of those guys who's going to be ready to step up. And the other thing about Georgia that not every team does is they'll roll through some offensive tackles throughout a game. We saw it last year, multiple guys getting in at some of those spots. Micah Morris, even though he wasn't a starter, did play a lot last year, and partly because of injury, but Georgia would just roll those guys in for a series. So can he be that third offensive tackle that Georgia would need? Now, Bo Hughley and Ja Jackson will have something to say about that, but can he get past those guys this fall and work his way up? Because I think he can get in there and get some time this year. It'd be a great thing if he gets in and gets some snaps this year. I don't think Georgia's – ideally – you don't have to depend on him if Ernest Green and Monroe Freeland can stay healthy. But if even if those guys need a blow, or you get these first couple games in the heat when you get hopefully some blowout wins, maybe this guy gets in there and gets some snaps and proves what he can do.
So last one on the list is going to be the running back Bo Walker. And here's the thing: is like, if you heard any buzz about Bo Walker this spring and you're like, why? Because he's a 3-star running back. I mean, I understand that.
Out of Raven Gap Nakuchi School,
exactly.
if you just look at the roster, right?
But if you have seen Bo Walker play high school football at all, you can understand why there's hype around him. Did play for Raven Gap his senior year, but in the years before that, he played for Cedar Grove, which was an absolute powerhouse of a high school program. At the time, they were only in the 3A classification, but would purposely schedule teams like Buford and Milton, who
going
were
around the country.
Double their size. That way they could prepare their players not just for the postseason, but also for the next level of football. I mean, they were shipping guys off to places all over the country at the D1 level. So Bo Walker, he's the only running back in this class, so they're going to have to rely on him a lot, but he's definitely has the experience at the high school level to make an impact early on in this running back group.
Yeah, when we talked about the offensive and defensive line, we said it's really hard to get on the football field as a freshman on the offensive and defensive line, especially in the SEC. That is not the case at running back. We saw it last year with Nate Frazier. First game, he had 83 yards and a touchdown. And none of that, we're not putting any of this on Bo Walker that he has to do any of this, but it just goes to show you. And Nate Frazier was a summer enrollee, by the way.
Yeah.
Bo Walker had a spring practice under his belt. So there's no limit to what you can do as a freshman running back for Georgia, and that's good news. So excited to see what Bo Walker – and we saw how much Georgia thought of him, how much he got the ball in the G-Day game. They're feeding him the ball, seeing what he can do. I think he's one of those who could make maybe the biggest impact of these 2025 guys, because he's going to play probably more snaps than any of them will.